Hi, my name is Liz Meyer, and I'm an associate professor at the University of Colorado Boulder. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about our article titled Title IX Coordinators as Street Level Bureaucrats in U.S. Schools, Challenges Addressing Sex Discrimination in the Me Too Era. And this project came out of my prior research around issues of bullying and harassment in schools and trying to identify who at each school district is really going to be the prime person helping schools be proactive about integrating new mandates from new California and Colorado legislation, for example, and interpreting and applying guidance coming from the Office for Civil Rights in the form of Dear Colleague letters around various new guidance implicating Title IX. So, for example, we had the Dear Colleague letter in April 2015 about the role of the Title IX coordinator, and it gave some pretty specific examples of what the Title IX coordinator should be responsible for, and making sure that they don't have any sorts of conflict of interest or anything that's going to pull them away from their key Title IX duties in their school district. So in this project, we reached out to Title IX coordinators in school districts in the two states of our institutions, in Colorado and California. And we reached out to 103 school districts. We identified who on their school website is meant to be the Title IX coordinator and reached out to them and invited them to participate. Of the 103 school districts we contacted, we were able to confirm 10 participants from 8 different districts. So that means 2 districts had an interview that included the key Title IX coordinator, and their superintendent also participated in the interview. The interviews were conducted at a place of their choosing and happened in about 30 to 60 minutes, and we talked about various topics related to their job descriptions and duties, their training and education, their understanding of the new guidance coming around transgender students in 2016, and anything else they wanted to talk to us about their job. So of the participants, we had 6 male identified and 4 female identified. They were primarily Anglo or Caucasian identified. Their average age was 50 years old, and most of them had been working in districts for about 8 years. In analyzing the data, we realized there was a lot of overlap with Lipsky's framework of street-level bureaucrats. And as we started to dive into the data, we realized much of what we were finding laid nicely on with his theories. Specifically, 4 elements identified here: inadequate resources, demand for services exceeds supply, agency goals are ambiguous, vague, or conflicting, and the performance is difficult to measure. I'm going to highlight 4 categories of our findings: job descriptions and duties, training, education, and evaluation, Title IX and transgender students, and then implications for improving practice. We found most troubling elements around their job descriptions and duties, and that this Title IX coordinator position was often one small part of a much larger job and was often assigned with other duties that were quite significant, and that most respondents reported that these duties took less than 10% of their time, and oftentimes less than 1% or even 0.5% of their time. And even more surprisingly, many of them were unaware of their Title IX coordinator aspect of their jobs when they started it, and they reported finding out about it 6 months or even a year later when they got a letter from the OCR with some information, or when they asked somebody about who was the Title IX coordinator. In terms of training and education, we found that they relied heavily on their district legal counsel and just their personal networks, that they didn't seem to seek out or have the opportunities to get official trainings from various definitive sources, whether it be the Association of Title IX Administrators or the Office of Civil Rights or Educational Law Association, that they just tended to rely on Google and their lawyers and their personal networks. In terms of transgender students and the Title IX guidance that was issued in 2016, which did impact this study because that was the time frame when we were doing the interviews, very few folks saw supports for transgender students as aligned with their responsibilities as the Title IX coordinator. And oftentimes we learned that the Title IX coordinator was actually a more staff-facing position, like an HR director, and didn't really see themselves as responsible for student climate or student-related issues. So sort of the implications of this is we find that there were a lot of districts that we had Title IX coordinators were difficult to find or were reluctant to be interviewed. that many of them were untrained or had very little knowledge of their job and responsibilities. And oftentimes this then can open up districts for liability and fails to meet opportunities for education and proactive efforts to make schools more inclusive and supportive of gender diversity and addressing issues of sex-based discrimination. So we do recognize that these administrators have very large jobs, and so they are doing the best they can, and that's why the street-level bureaucracy framework was extremely helpful in understanding the context of their work. However, we do have several recommendations for improving practice, mostly related to things that should happen at the federal level in terms of auditing districts, in terms of their presence of a Title IX coordinator and their training levels, creating a public searchable database of Title IX coordinators, providing webinars and other kinds of free as needed training opportunities, and even offering sort of regional study groups or PLCs for Title IX coordinators to connect with each other and share information and resources in a non-judgmental, non-evaluative setting. We also think that school districts should publish and disseminate their names, make them more visible on their websites, prioritize training and supports for these Title IX coordinators, and make sure that they are engaging in proactive and education activities at the district. We also have several recommendations for the coordinators themselves to take the initiative, pursue professional learning opportunities, and to be proactive in educating their colleagues around reviewing and updating policies and practices. So in conclusion, in the group of participants in our study, we found some troubling elements around the Title IX coordinator role, which does not bode well for students experiencing discrimination or for schools who are thinking that they are trying to do better by their students in addressing issues based on Title IX elements. And so we really want the findings from this study to help encourage folks in their regions to inquire about who their Title IX coordinator is, connect with your school districts, and find out what they're doing to be proactive about education around gender equity in their schools, and hopefully find ways to not just protect schools from legal liability, but ensure that the schools and school districts are taking steps to address issues of sex-based discrimination in their school communities.